They say you never truly know someone until money comes between you. I used to think that was cynical. Cold, even. Then I discovered my own son had been systematically draining my accounts for 18 months. $3,000 every single month. $54,000 of my retirement savings, gone. And the worst part? He was laughing about it, telling his girlfriend I was too senile to notice. My name is Linda Morrison. I'm 72 years old, a retired high school English teacher from Toledo, Ohio, and I never imagined I'd be sitting here telling this story. For 35 years, I taught Shakespeare and Steinbeck to teenagers who thought they knew everything about the world. I taught them about betrayal in literature, about Brutus and Caesar, about the knife that cuts deepest being the one wielded by those we love. I just never thought I'd be living it. I'm a widow. My husband James passed away 6 years ago after a sudden heart attack. We'd been married for 43 years. He was my everything. And when he died, my world shattered into a million pieces. But I survived. I had to. For myself and for our son, David. David was our only child. We'd tried for years to have children, gone through treatments, suffered through miscarriages. When David finally came into our lives, he was our miracle. Our perfect, beautiful miracle. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe we loved him too much, protected him too much, made excuses for him when we shouldn't have. Looking back now with the bitter clarity that only betrayal can bring, I can see the warning signs we ignored. When David was 16, his baseball coach called us in for a meeting. Money had been going missing from the team's equipment fund. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. The coach couldn't prove anything, but the theft stopped after David quit the team. James and I told ourselves it was just teenage stupidity. Kids make mistakes, right? In college, David maxed out the credit card we'd given him for emergencies. $8,000 on God knows what. He cried, apologized, promised it would never happen again. We paid it off and closed the account. We told ourselves he was young, learning to manage money, that everyone makes financial mistakes in their 20s. When he was 30, he asked to borrow $15,000 to start a business. A consulting firm, he said. He had clients lined up, just needed startup capital. 6 months later, the business was gone, and so was our money. Bad economy, he explained. Bad timing. We wrote it off. These things happen. I see it all so differently now. The pattern was always there. We just loved him too much to see it. After James died, I felt completely lost. The house we'd shared for decades suddenly felt enormous and empty. I'd wake up in the middle of the night reaching for him, only to find cold sheets. The silence was suffocating. I'd find myself setting 2 plates for dinner before remembering. The grief counselor I saw told me it was normal, that it would get better with time. She was right, but those first 2 years were unbearable. David was wonderful during that time. I have to give him that. He was 43 then, still unmarried, working in sales, or at least that's what he told me. He'd come by twice a week, help me with things around the house, take me to dinner. We'd talk about his father, share memories, cry together. Having him there made the grief bearable. He was all I had left of James. About a year after James passed, David suggested we set up a joint checking account. Mom, he said, sitting at my kitchen table, that same table where we'd shared thousands of family dinners. I worry about you. What if something happens? What if you fall or have a medical emergency and I can't access your accounts to pay your bills? Let me be added to your main checking account, just for emergencies. It made sense. Perfect sense, actually. I was getting older. My knees were starting to go. I'd had a scare with my blood pressure. What if I did end up in the hospital, unable to manage my own affairs? David was my son, my only family. Of course I trusted him. We went to the bank together on a Tuesday morning. I remember because it was raining, one of those steady Ohio rains that seems to soak into your bones. The banker, a young woman with a professional smile, walked us through the paperwork. You're adding your son as a joint account holder with full access, she confirmed. He'll be able to make deposits, withdrawals, transfers, everything you can do. That's right, I said, signing my name on the dotted line. David squeezed my shoulder affectionately. You're doing the right thing, Mom. I'll take care of everything if you ever need me to. That was 3 years ago. For the first year and a half, everything was fine. Better than fine, actually. David became even more attentive. He'd call me almost every day, stop by for dinner at least once a week. He'd bring takeout from my favorite Chinese restaurant, or sometimes he'd cook, though he wasn't particularly good at it. We'd watch old movies together, James's favorites. Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon. David would fall asleep on the couch, and I'd cover him with the Afghan I'd crocheted years ago. I wasn't checking my bank statements carefully. I admit that. Why would I? My retirement pension was deposited automatically. My bills were mostly on autopay. I'd glance at the balance online once in a while, see that it looked reasonable, and move on. I was busy with my book club, my church activities, my Tuesday bridge games with the girls. I was finally starting to feel like myself again, like I could breathe without that crushing weight of grief on my chest. Money had never been something I worried about. James and I had been careful savers. We'd paid off the house 20 years ago. We didn't live extravagantly. Between my teacher's pension, James's life insurance, and our combined retirement savings, I had enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, or so I thought. David started dating someone about 2 years ago. Her name was Brittany. She was 31, worked as a bartender, had bleach blonde hair and long acrylic nails that clicked when she typed on her phone, which was constantly. I tried to like her. I really did. David seemed happy, and that's all a mother wants, right? But there was something about her that made me uncomfortable. The way she'd look around my house, assessing. The way she'd ask pointed questions about my finances and estate planning. The first time I met her, David brought her to Sunday dinner. I'd made pot roast, James's favorite. I thought it would be a nice gesture. Brittany picked at her food, scrolling through her phone between bites. "So, Linda," she said, finally looking up, "David tells me you own this house outright. That's smart. Real estate is such a good investment." "We paid it off 20 years ago," I said, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "And you live here all alone? In this big house?" She looked around the dining room, and I could almost see her calculating square footage, property value. "You ever think about downsizing? Moving into one of those senior communities?" "I'm quite happy here, thank you." Sure. But I mean the upkeep on a place like this, the property taxes. Seems like a lot for one person." She reached over and squeezed David's hand. "We were just saying the other day how David could help you manage all that. Maybe even move in, help with expenses." David had smiled at her like she'd said something brilliant instead of something calculating and transparent. Another time, maybe 3 months later, Brittany showed up at my house alone. David was supposedly at a work conference. She had a folder with her, brochures. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, though I knew she lived across town, "and I wanted to show you these." She spread glossy pamphlets across my coffee table, senior living communities, assisted living facilities, just to have information, for planning. "Brittany, I'm 71, not 91. I'm perfectly capable of living independently." "Of course you are. I just thought, it's good to be prepared. And some of these places, they give you a good deal if you sign up early." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential tone. "Between you and me, David worries about you. He feels guilty that he can't be here more. If you were in one of these places, there'd be people around all the time. Wouldn't that be nice?" What would be nice, I thought, but didn't say, would be if my son's girlfriend stopped trying to ship me off to a nursing home so they could get their hands on my house. "You know, Linda," she said one evening, calling me by my first name though I'd never invited her to, "you really should think about updating your will. Make sure David is taken care of. You never know what could happen." I was 71 years old. I didn't need a 31-year-old bartender telling me about estate planning. The first crack in my obliviousness came 6 months ago. I was at the grocery store, my usual Wednesday morning trip to Kroger. I'd filled my cart with the essentials, got to the checkout, and handed over my debit card. The machine beeped, declined. "Must be a mistake," I said, embarrassed as the young cashier looked at me with poorly disguised pity. "Try it again." She did, declined again. "I'll use another card," I said, fumbling through my wallet, my hands shaking. The woman behind me in line sighed audibly. I paid with my credit card and rushed out of the store, my face burning with humiliation. In the parking lot, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. The heat of shame spread from my chest to my neck. Something was very wrong. As soon as I got home, I called the bank. My hands were still trembling as I dialed. "Mrs. Morrison?" The customer service representative said, her voice professionally neutral. "Your checking account balance is currently $472. I felt my stomach drop. The room seemed to tilt. That can't be right. I had over $8,000 in there last week. There was a pause. The sound of typing. "I'm showing several large withdrawals over the past few weeks. Would you like me to go through them?" "Yes," I whispered. "Transfer to David Morrison. $1,500. Withdrawal at ATM on Elm Street. $500. David Morrison. Transfer to David Morrison. $2,000. Online transfer to David Morrison. $1,200. The list went on, and on, and on. "Ma'am? Mrs. Morrison? Are you still there?" I was there, but I felt like I was drowning, like someone had pushed me underwater and I couldn't find the surface. How long has this been going on?" More typing. "I'm seeing similar patterns going back, approximately 18 months. 18 months. A year and a half. While I'd been grieving my husband, rebuilding my life, treasuring my time with my son, he'd been robbing me blind. I hung up and sat in my kitchen, staring at nothing. The clock above the stove ticked loudly. Outside, I could hear children playing in the neighbor's yard, their laughter cutting through my shock like glass. I thought I might be sick. I made it to the bathroom just in time, retching over the toilet, my body rejecting the reality of what I'd just learned. I didn't confront him immediately. I've always been methodical, a trait that served me well as a teacher. You don't walk into a classroom full of teenagers without a plan. So I didn't confront my 45-year-old son without gathering every shred of evidence first. I drove to the bank the next morning. I asked for printed statements, every single one for the past 3 years. The banker, a different woman this time, older, with kind eyes, seemed to sense something was wrong. She didn't ask questions, just printed everything and put it in a large envelope. At home, I spread the statements across my dining room table. This table where we'd celebrated David's birthdays, where James and I had done our taxes every year, where I'd graded thousands of essays. Now it held the evidence of my son's betrayal. I started highlighting the withdrawals, using the same green highlighter I'd used for decades to mark good passages in student essays. But there was nothing good here. Just theft after theft after theft. It had started small. $200 here, $300 there. Cash withdrawals that I could have mistaken for my own if I'd been checking. But then it escalated. By month 6, he was taking over $2,000 monthly. By month 10, it was $3,000, like clockwork, sometimes more. I calculated the total 3 times because I couldn't believe it, couldn't accept it. $54,347 gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Every good memory with David was now tainted. Every dinner, every conversation, every "I love you, Mom." Had it all been manipulation? Had he ever loved me? Or had I just been a bank account with emotional attachments? I must have looked terrible the next day because my friend Margaret noticed immediately. We were at our Tuesday bridge game, and I just bid completely wrong, not paying attention to my hand at all. "Linda?" Margaret set down her cards and looked at me with concern. "Are you feeling all right? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied, but my voice cracked. "You are most definitely not fine." Margaret has known me for 30 years. We taught at the same high school. She knows when I'm lying. "Girls, give us a minute." The other 2 women nodded, moving to the kitchen to refill their coffee. Margaret pulled her chair closer to mine. "What's happened?" I don't know why I broke down then. Maybe because she asked with such genuine care. Maybe because I couldn't carry the weight alone anymore. But I told her. Everything. The withdrawals, the amounts, the timeline. As I spoke, Margaret's face went from concerned to horrified to angry. "That son of a—" She stopped herself. "Linda, you need to call a lawyer, today, not tomorrow, today." I don't even know where to start. Phil Blackstone. He handled my sister's estate. He's tough but fair. She grabbed her phone. I'm calling him right now. Before I could protest, she was on the phone, explaining the situation in the clipped, no-nonsense tone she used to use with administrators who weren't doing their jobs. Within an hour, I had an appointment for the next morning, but I wasn't done gathering evidence. That evening, I did something I'm not proud of. I created a fake Facebook profile. Sarah Johnson, complete with a generic profile picture I found online. I sent friend requests to both David and Brittany. Brittany accepted within an hour. What I found on her page made me physically ill. Photos of her at expensive restaurants. Bay treating me right. A picture of a designer handbag. Look what my man got me. A photo from a weekend trip to Chicago. Living my best life thanks to Babe's generosity. And then, the one that made me screenshot everything immediately. A post from 3 weeks ago. When his mom is loaded and doesn't even check her accounts, LOL. We eating good tonight, ladies. My son's girlfriend was bragging on social media about stealing from me, and David had liked the post. I took screenshots of everything, every post, every photo, every comment. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely work my phone, but I got it all. Evidence. Cold, hard, digital evidence. The next morning, I met with Phil Blackstone. His office was downtown in one of those old buildings with high ceilings and dark wood paneling. He was in his 60s, gray-haired, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I laid out the bank statements on his desk, then the screenshots, then the timeline I'd created, color-coded and detailed. Phil studied everything in silence. When he finally looked up, his expression was grave. Mrs. Morrison, this is textbook financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Your son had legal access to the account, which complicates things criminally, but civilly, you have options. And frankly, he's been incredibly stupid about it. This social media evidence is damning. What are my options? First, we close that joint account immediately, today. Then we open new accounts in only your name. We change any automatic deposits or payments. We cut off his access completely. And then? Then you decide if you want to press charges. With this amount of money and this evidence, the prosecutor would likely be interested. We're talking about potential felony theft. The thought of my son in jail made my stomach turn. But then I thought about that Facebook post, about him laughing with Brittany about my senility, about 18 months of calculated theft while he pretended to care about me. Let me think about the criminal charges, I said. But yes to everything else. Cut him off. Today. We spent the next 3 hours at the bank. New accounts, new checks, new debit cards, new login information for everything. I moved money from savings to checking. I updated my direct deposit information for my pension. I changed every single password on every single financial account I had. By the time I left the bank, it was mid-afternoon. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but I felt something else too. Something I hadn't felt in months. Control. For the first time since that declined card at Kroger, I felt like I was taking action instead of being a victim. That night, David called. Hey, Mom, just checking in. Haven't talked to you in a few days. My heart was pounding. I'm fine, David. Good, good. Hey, I'm a little short this month. Car repair, nothing major. Could you transfer me about $1,500? He said it so casually, so confidently, like it was his money. Like I was an ATM that happened to cook him dinner sometimes. No. What? I said no. Mom, come on, it's my car. I need it for work. Then I suggest you figure out how to pay for it yourself. Mom, what's going on? Are you okay? The concern in his voice might have fooled me a week ago. Now it just made me angry. I know, David. Know what? I know about the money, all of it. Every withdrawal, every transfer, $54,000, 18 months of theft. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Mom, I can explain. Don't. Just don't. I've closed the joint account. You no longer have access to my money. You can't do that. That's my account, too. It's my money, David. It was always my money. You were supposed to have access for emergencies, not to fund your lifestyle and buy gifts for your girlfriend. This is crazy. Brittany said you'd do something like this. She said you were getting paranoid in your old age. Oh, Brittany said that, did she? Is that before or after she posted on Facebook about how you were stealing from your senile mother? Another silence. Longer this time. You're stalking her social media. That's insane, Mom. I have screenshots, David, of everything. Her bragging about my money, you liking her posts, all of it. I don't have to listen to this. His voice had gone cold, hard. This was a side of David I'd never heard before. No, you don't. But you will listen to this. I've consulted a lawyer. I have documentation of every fraudulent withdrawal. I know exactly what you've taken and when, and I'm giving you one chance to make this right. What do you want? I want the money back. All of it. You have 30 days to come up with a repayment plan, or I go to the police. He laughed. Actually laughed. You're bluffing. You'd never send me to jail. Try me. Mom, you don't understand. I needed that money. I have expenses. Brittany and I have plans. Plans funded by my retirement savings? Plans built on stealing from your widowed mother? It's not stealing. You're my mother. Your money is family money. No, David. My money is my money. I worked for 43 years. Your father and I saved carefully so we could have a comfortable retirement. He died and I'm alone, and I plan to use that money to take care of myself, not to bankroll your life. You're being selfish after everything I've done for you. Everything you've done for me? You mean visiting me while you systematically robbed me? That's not love, David. That's not care. That's called being a con artist. I want you to know you're making a huge mistake. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is trusting you. You're going to die alone, you know that? Bitter and alone. And it'll be your own fault. The words should have hurt. A week ago, they would have destroyed me. But now, after everything I knew, they just made me sad. Sad for the man my son had become. Sad for myself, for the years I'd wasted believing in someone who never existed. If being alone means being safe from people who pretend to love me while stealing my future, then I'll take a loan. This isn't over. Yes, David, it is. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I thought I might cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The confrontation I'd been dreading was over, and I'd survived it. The next few days were chaos. David called repeatedly. I didn't answer. He left voicemails ranging from angry to pleading to threatening. I saved them all just in case. Brittany called too, screaming about how I was ruining their lives, how David was a good man and I was too stupid to see it, how I deserved to be alone. I blocked both their numbers. Then came the call from David's landlord, Bradley Chen. His rent check had bounced 2 months in a row. He wanted to know if I'd cover it. The assumption that I would, that David had been so confident I would, told me everything I needed to know about how he'd been planning his future. My money was his backup plan, his safety net, his endless resource. I told Mr. Chen the truth, every bit of it. He was shocked, apologetic, and proceeded with eviction proceedings. David's calls became more desperate after that. The facade was crumbling. Without access to my money, his carefully constructed life was falling apart. Good. It's been 4 months now. Phil Blackstone advised against pressing criminal charges. It'll be a long, painful process, Linda. Court appearances, testimony, media attention. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I finally said. I just want peace. Then you've done what you needed to do. You've protected yourself. You've cut him off. Sometimes that's enough. Is it enough? I don't know. Some days I wake up and I'm angry all over again. Other days I'm just sad. Sad for the little boy who used to catch fireflies in our backyard. Sad for the teenager who brought me dandelions picked from the yard, thinking they were the most beautiful flowers in the world. Sad for the young man who cried at his father's funeral and held my hand like he'd never let go. That person either never existed or he died somewhere along the way. The man who stole from me, who laughed about it with his girlfriend, who tried to manipulate me even after being caught. That's who David is now. I've heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Brittany broke up. Apparently, without my money, he wasn't quite as generous, and she wasn't quite as interested. He lost his apartment and is living with a friend. He's struggling. Part of me, a small part, feels sorry for him, but it's a very small part. I started seeing a therapist about 2 months ago, Dr. Patricia Chen, a woman in her 50s who specializes in family trauma and elder abuse. I resisted at first. I'm from a generation that doesn't really do therapy. We cope. We move on. We don't sit in offices talking about our feelings for $150 an hour. But Margaret insisted, "You've been through trauma, Linda. You need to process it with someone who knows what they're doing." She was right. In therapy, I've learned things about myself I didn't know. I've learned that I struggle with saying no, even when no is the only appropriate answer. That I equate being needed with being loved. That I've spent so much of my life taking care of other people, I forgot how to take care of myself. "What do you think you lost?" Dr. Chen asked me in our third session. $54,000, I said. "What else?" I thought about it, really thought about it. My relationship with my son. What else? My trust in other people, in myself. And what have you gained? The question surprised me. I'd been so focused on what had been taken, I hadn't thought about what I'd found. My power, I said slowly, my agency, my ability to set boundaries and enforce them, my understanding that I'm valuable, with or without David in my life. Dr. Chen smiled. "That's good, Linda. That's really good." The rest of me? The rest of me is learning to live again. Really live. I've joined a new book club, one that meets at the local library on Thursday evenings. We just finished reading Educated by Tara Westover, a memoir about breaking free from a toxic family. The irony wasn't lost on me. I've started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping women who've been taken advantage of by people they trusted. I share my story. I help them understand that financial abuse is abuse, even when it comes from family, especially when it comes from family. Last Tuesday, I met with a woman named Sarah. She was 34 with 2 small children, and her husband had been controlling all their finances for years. She had no access to bank accounts, no credit cards in her name, no idea how much money they even had. "But he's not violent," she kept saying, as if that made it acceptable. "He just says I'm bad with money, that I don't understand these things." I sat across from her in that small counseling room, holding a cup of terrible coffee from the machine in the hallway, and I saw myself, saw the excuses, the justifications, the desperate need to believe the best in someone who was actively harming her. Financial abuse is a form of control, I told her. It traps you. It makes you dependent. It strips away your autonomy piece by piece until you can't even imagine leaving because you have no resources, no options, no way forward. "But family is different," she said. "When it's your husband or your parent or your child, it's different. They love you." "No," I said firmly. "Love doesn't steal. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't leave you vulnerable and alone. What you're describing isn't love. It's control wrapped in the language of love." She started crying then. I held her hand. I told her about David, about the stolen $54,000, about the Facebook posts and the fake concern and the 18 months of systematic theft. I told her about how I'd blamed myself, wondered if I'd been too trusting, too naive, too stupid. "But you weren't stupid," she said, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. "You loved your son." "Yes. And that's what they count on. These people who hurt us, they count on our love being stronger than our self-preservation. They count on us making excuses for them. They count on us being too embarrassed, too proud, too hopeful to protect ourselves. Working with these women has become part of my healing. Every woman I help see the truth, every person I help towards safety, it feels like taking back a piece of what David stole from me. Not just the money, the trust, the belief in basic human decency. I'm planning a trip to Ireland next spring, something James and I always talked about but never did. I've already booked the flight. I'm going to see the Cliffs of Moher, visit the Book of Kells, drink Guinness in a real Irish pub. I'm going alone, and I'm not scared. I'm excited, and I check my bank statements. Every single day. Not out of fear, but out of vigilance. I'll never be that trusting again. Maybe that's sad. Or maybe it's just wisdom. My body has started healing too. I didn't realize how much stress I'd been carrying until it was gone. The tension headaches that had become almost constant have faded. I'm sleeping through the night again. My blood pressure, which had been creeping up, is back to normal. Stress, my doctor told me, can manifest in ways we don't recognize. The body keeps score. Last week, Margaret and I went to lunch at that little cafe downtown we both love. Over quiche and coffee, she asked me how I was really doing. Better, I said, and I meant it. Some days are hard. I'll see something that reminds me of him, of how things used to be, and it hurts. But then I remember it was all a lie. It wasn't all a lie, Margaret said gently. You loved him. That was real. What he became, that's on him, not you. I keep wondering if I did something wrong, if I spoiled him too much, protected him too much. Linda Morrison, you listened to me. You were a good mother, a great mother. What David chose to do as an adult, that's his choice, his failure, not yours. To anyone listening who might be in a similar situation, who might have family members with access to their accounts, who might be thinking, but they would never. Please hear me. Check your statements. Protect yourself. Trust, but verify. Love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be victimized. And if you discover what I discovered, know that you're not alone. Know that taking action doesn't make you cruel or unloving. It makes you strong. It makes you a survivor. I taught literature for 35 years. I taught students about tragedy, about betrayal, about the complex nature of human relationships. I taught them about King Lear, a man betrayed by his children. I just never thought I'd understand him quite so personally. But here's what Lear didn't know, what I'm learning now. You can survive the betrayal. You can rebuild. You can still have a good life, maybe even a better life without the person who hurt you. I'm 72 years old. I'm alone. But I'm not helpless. I'm not a victim. And my money, my security, my future, they're mine again. That's enough.